Tom had been out of work for 3 months when he saw the newspaper ad that would change his life forever. The small print at the bottom of the classified section caught his eye. Foreclosed property, $1 minimum bid, county auction Saturday, 10 a.m. $1. Tom read it twice to make sure he wasn't seeing things wrong. He had exactly $43 in his wallet, which was supposed to last him until his unemployment check came in next week. But $1? Even he could afford that. The past few months had been the hardest of Tom's 34 years. He'd worked construction since he was 18, building houses and fixing roofs all around their small Ohio town. But when the economy went bad, the building stopped. First, his company laid off the newer guys. Then they started letting go of people who'd been there for years. Tom was one of the last to go, but go he did. He'd been living in a tiny apartment above Mrs. Peterson's garage, paying what little rent he could manage by doing odd jobs around her property. But even that was getting harder to afford. Maybe, Tom thought, this $1 property could be his chance to have something of his own. Even if it was falling apart, it would be his. Saturday morning came gray and drizzly. Tom drove his old pickup truck to the county courthouse where a small crowd had gathered for the auction. Most people looked like they had money, men in clean suits and women with fancy handbags. Tom felt out of place in his worn jeans and work boots, but he stayed anyway. The auctioneer, a round man with a thick mustache, called out lot numbers one by one. Tom watched expensive houses and commercial buildings sell for thousands of dollars. People bid against each other with confident hand signals, like they were playing some game Tom didn't understand. Then came lot number 47. "We have a residential property on Elm Creek Road," the auctioneer announced. "This is a fixer-upper, folks. The structure needs significant work. Minimum bid is $1. A few people in the crowd laughed. Tom heard someone behind him whisper, "More like a teardown if you ask me." But Tom raised his hand. "We have $1, the auctioneer called out. He looked around the crowd. "Anyone else? This property sits on just over a quarter acre. Great, for someone who likes a project." Tom's heart pounded as he waited. Seconds felt like hours. A woman in a blue dress looked like she might raise her hand, but then she shook her head and turned away. Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman. In the front for $1. Tom couldn't believe it. He actually owned something. After signing papers and paying his $1, plus $35 in fees, he got directions to Elm Creek Road. The clerk handed him a key and said, "Good luck. You're gonna need it." The drive to his new property took 20 minutes through winding country roads. Tom had never been out this far from town. The road got narrower and bumpier until it was barely more than a dirt path. Finally, he saw a rusted mailbox with numbers that matched his paperwork. What he found at the end of the driveway made his stomach drop. The house, if you could call it that, looked like it hadn't been painted in 20 years. The roof sagged, in the middle. Several windows were boarded up with plywood. Weeds grew everywhere, some as tall as Tom himself. An old washing machine sat in the front yard, rust stains running down its sides like tears. Tom sat in his truck for a long moment, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. This wasn't just a fixer-upper. This was barely even a house anymore. But then he remembered his empty wallet and his uncertain future. At least this was his. Nobody could take it away from him as long as he paid the property taxes. He grabbed his toolbox from the back of his truck and walked toward the front door. The wooden steps creaked under his weight, and he had to be careful not to put his foot through a rotten board. The key turned easily in the lock, which surprised him. Most abandoned places had locks that were rusted shut. The front door opened, with a long, loud squeal that echoed through the empty house. Tom stepped inside and immediately smelled something musty and old. Dust particles danced in the streams of light coming through cracks in the boarded windows. The inside was dark, but Tom could make out a small living room with a stone fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and what looked like 2 bedrooms down a short hallway. The wooden floors were warped in places, and there were water stains on the ceiling, but the bones of the house seemed solid enough. As Tom explored his new property, taking mental notes of what needed to be fixed first, something caught his eye. One of the boarded windows in the kitchen had a small gap where the plywood didn't quite meet the frame. Through that gap, Tom could see a thin strip of faded yellow fabric. Curtains. There were still curtains hanging in the window. Tom moved closer to get a better look, and that's when he saw it. The curtain moved, just a tiny bit, like someone had brushed against it from the other side. But there was no wind inside the house. He stood perfectly still, barely breathing, watching that window. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the curtain twitched again, definitely moved by something inside the house. Tom's first thought was that an animal had gotten in, maybe a raccoon or a stray cat. But as he stared at that window, something told him this wasn't an animal. The movement was too careful, too deliberate. Someone was in his house. Someone was watching him. The county clerk had assured him the property was vacant. All the paperwork said it was abandoned. But Tom's gut told him otherwise. He'd learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now, every instinct was telling him he wasn't alone. He didn't call out. He didn't make any sudden moves. Instead, Tom quietly backed toward the front door, his eyes never leaving that kitchen window. Whatever was in here with him, whoever was in here with him, they were probably more scared than he was. Tom stepped back outside and closed the door gently behind him. He sat on his truck's tailgate and looked at the house, his house, with new eyes. If someone was living there, they'd been forgotten, just like the property itself. In a county system that could let a house sell for $1, it wasn't hard to imagine how a person might get forgotten too. The sun was starting to set, painting the overgrown yard in shades of gold and orange. Tom made a decision. He would come back tomorrow in the daylight with more supplies. He would approach this situation carefully and kindly. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, he would handle it the right way. As he drove away, Tom looked in, his rearview mirror one last time. In the fading light, he could swear he saw a small face in that kitchen window, watching his truck disappear down the dirt road. That night, Tom lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about his $1 house. He'd bought it hoping to solve his own problems, but it seemed like he might have bought someone else's problems too. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Outside his window, the first stars were appearing in the clear Ohio sky. Tom fell asleep wondering who was sleeping in his house tonight, and whether they were as scared and uncertain about the future as he was. Tom didn't sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that curtain moving in the kitchen window. By sunrise, he'd made coffee and loaded his truck with everything he thought he might need: a flashlight, some basic tools, a first aid kit, and a bag of groceries including bread, peanut butter, and bottled water. The morning air was crisp as he drove back to Elm Creek Road. This time, he parked a little distance from the house and walked up slowly, making sure his footsteps were loud enough to announce his arrival. The last thing he wanted was to startle whoever might be inside. "Hello?" he called out when he reached the front door. "My name is Tom. I bought this house yesterday. I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just want to talk." He waited for a response, but heard only the sound of birds chirping in the overgrown trees. Tom tried the door handle. Still unlocked. He pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. "I'm coming in now," he said loudly. "I brought some food and water, in case anyone needs it." The house was brighter in the morning light. Thin beams of sunshine found their way through gaps in the boarded windows, creating a patchwork of light and shadow across the dusty floors. Tom set his bag of groceries on the kitchen counter and looked around. That's when he heard it. A tiny sound, like a shoe scuffing against wood. It came from the direction of the bedrooms. Tom's heart started beating faster, but he kept his voice calm and gentle. "I know someone's here," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." He moved slowly toward the hallway, his hands visible and empty. The first bedroom was completely empty except for an old mattress on the floor, but the second bedroom door was closed. Tom knocked softly on the door. "Can I come in, or would you rather come out and talk to me?" No answer. Very carefully, Tom turned the doorknob and opened the door just a crack. "I'm opening the door now. Don't be scared." What he saw made his chest tighten with concern. Sitting in the corner of the room, pressed against the wall like she was trying to disappear into it, was a young girl. She looked to be about 11 or 12 years old, with long brown hair that needed washing and clothes that had seen better days. In her arms, she clutched a stuffed rabbit that was missing one ear. The girl's eyes were the biggest, saddest eyes Tom had ever seen. They were also filled with fear. Tom immediately crouched down to make himself less threatening. He'd learned this from working with scared animals over the years. Make yourself smaller, move slowly, speak softly. "Hi there," he said in the gentlest voice he could manage. "What's your name?" The girl just stared at him. She didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't shake her head. She just watched him with those enormous dark eyes. "I'm Tom," he continued. "I bought this house, but I didn't know anyone was living here. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Still no response. But Tom noticed the girl's grip on her stuffed rabbit tighten slightly. "Are you hungry? I brought some food." Tom gestured toward the kitchen. "Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and some apples. Do you like apples?" The girl's eyes flicked briefly toward the kitchen, then back to Tom's face. It was the first sign that she was really listening to him. Tom slowly stood up. "I'm going to go make a sandwich. You can stay here if you want, or you can come watch me. Whatever makes you feel safe." He left the bedroom door open and went back to the kitchen. As he spread peanut butter on bread, he kept talking in that same gentle voice. "I used to be scared of strangers too when I was little," he said. "My mom always told me to be careful around people I didn't know. That's smart advice. But sometimes when we really need help, we have to take a chance on trusting someone new." Tom made 2 sandwiches, cut them into triangles the way his own mother used to do, and placed them on paper plates. He opened a bottle of water and set everything on the kitchen table. "There's food here whenever you want it," he called toward the bedroom. "I'm going to sit outside on the front steps and eat my lunch. You can join me if you want, or you can eat inside. Whatever feels right to you." Tom took his sandwich and water bottle outside. The morning sun felt good on his face as he sat on the creaky front steps. Behind him, he heard very soft footsteps moving around inside the house. While he ate, Tom thought about what he should do. This girl was obviously alone, probably homeless, and definitely in need of help. But she was also terrified. If he called the police or social services right away, she might run off and end up in an even worse situation. Tom had grown up in foster care himself. He knew how scary it could be when adults in uniforms showed up and started asking questions. Sometimes the system helped kids, but sometimes it just moved them from one bad situation to another. After about 10 minutes, Tom heard the front door open very quietly behind him. He didn't turn around, didn't want to make the girl feel trapped or watched. Instead, he just kept looking out at the overgrown yard and speaking in that same calm voice. "It's a nice morning," he said. "Little chilly, but the sun feels good. This yard could be really pretty if someone cleared out all these weeds. I bet there are flowers buried under there somewhere." He heard footsteps on the porch behind him, very careful and quiet. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the girl sit down on the far end of the steps. She was still clutching her stuffed rabbit, and she'd brought one of the sandwiches with her. They sat together in silence for a while, eating their lunch and watching a squirrel dig around in the tall grass. The girl ate slowly, like she was trying to make the sandwich last as long as possible. Tom wondered when she'd had her last real meal. "That's a nice rabbit," Tom said eventually, nodding toward the stuffed animal. "What's his name?" The girl looked down at her toy, then back at Tom. Her mouth opened slightly, like she might be about to speak, but then she closed it again and just shook her head. "That's okay," Tom said. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I had a stuffed dog when I was your age. His name was Buddy. He went everywhere with me." The girl's eyes showed a flicker of interest, but she still didn't speak. Tom finished his sandwich and stood up slowly. "I'm going to do a little work on the house today. Just looking around, figuring out what needs to be fixed. You're welcome to watch if you want, or you can stay wherever you feel comfortable." He spent the next few hours walking around the property, checking the foundation, testing floorboards, and making notes in a small notebook. The girl followed him at a distance, always staying about 10 feet away. always ready to run if she needed. Tom talked while he worked, explaining what he was doing and why. "This board is rotten," he'd say, pointing to a piece of the front porch. "See how it's soft and dark? That means water got into it and it started to decay. We'll need to replace it." By late afternoon, Tom had learned a few things about his silent companion. She was smart. He could tell by the way she watched him work and seemed to understand everything he explained. She was also very thin, probably hadn't been eating regularly for a while, and she was completely, utterly alone. As the sun started to get lower in the sky, Tom knew he had to make a difficult decision. He couldn't just leave her here by herself for another night, but he also couldn't force her to come with him. "I need to go home soon," he said, sitting back down on the front steps. The girl was sitting on a tree stump about 15 feet away, still watching him. "But I'm worried about you staying here alone. It gets pretty cold at night." The girl's eyes showed panic for the first time all day. She stood up quickly, like she was getting ready to run. "Wait," Tom said gently. "I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, but I want you to know that you have choices. You can come stay with me tonight. I have a small apartment, and you'd have your own bed. Or if you want to stay here, I can bring you some blankets and more food." The girl looked torn. Tom could see her struggling with the decision. "Think about it," he said. "I'm going to pack up my tools. Take all the time you need." When Tom came back from loading his truck, he found a piece of paper on the kitchen table. In careful, neat handwriting, someone had written, "Thank you for the sandwich." The girl was nowhere to be seen, but Tom noticed that the second sandwich was gone, along with one of the bottles of water. "I'll be back tomorrow," Tom called out to the empty house. "Same time, and I'll bring more food." As he drove away, Tom looked in his rearview mirror one more time. In the kitchen window, barely visible behind the gap in the plywood, he saw a small hand wave goodbye. That night, Tom lay awake again, but this time his thoughts were clearer. He had found someone who needed help, and somehow she had found him too. Tomorrow he would come back with more supplies, more food, and more patience. Whatever had brought this girl to his $1 house, whatever had made her so afraid of the world, Tom was determined to help her find her way back to safety, even if it took time, even if it took everything he had. Tom woke up before dawn the next morning with a plan. Instead of just bringing food and hoping for the best, he decided to approach this more thoughtfully. He stopped at the library first and checked out some books about child psychology and trauma. Then he went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for a proper meal, not just sandwiches. By the time he reached the house on Elm Creek Road, Tom had a cooler full of fresh ingredients and a small camping stove in the back of his truck. If the girl was going to stay in the house, he could at least make sure she was eating well. "Good morning," he called out as he approached the front door. "It's Tom again. I brought some things to cook a real breakfast." This time he heard movement inside the house almost immediately. When he opened the door, he found the girl sitting at the kitchen table, still holding her one-eared rabbit. She watched him with those same cautious eyes, but she didn't try to hide or run away. "Progress." "I thought maybe we could have pancakes," Tom said, setting up the camping stove near an open window for ventilation. "Do you like pancakes?" The girl nodded. It was tiny, barely visible, but it was definitely a nod. Tom smiled. "Great. I'll need an assistant chef, though. Think you can help me?" Another small nod. As Tom mixed the batter, he kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation. He told her about growing up in foster care, about learning to cook from Mrs. Chen at the third house he'd lived in. He talked about his job, about the different tools he used, about the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. The girl listened to everything, and slowly, very slowly, she began to participate. When Tom asked her to hand him a spoon, she did. When he showed her how to flip a pancake, she watched intently. When he offered her the spatula to try it herself, she took it with trembling hands and managed to flip a pancake perfectly. "That was excellent," Tom said, and he meant it. "You're a natural." For the first time since he'd met her, the girl almost smiled. The corners of her mouth turned up just a little bit, and some of the fear left her eyes. They ate breakfast together, on the front steps again. The pancakes were fluffy and warm, and Tom had brought real maple syrup and fresh strawberries. The girl ate slowly but steadily, and Tom noticed she was careful to save some food for later. "Can I ask you something?" Tom said when they were almost finished eating. "Have you been living here by yourself for a long time?" The girl sat down, her fork, and looked at her hands. After a long moment, she held up both hands, fingers spread wide. Then she closed them and held up 3 more fingers. 13. She'd been alone for 13 days. Tom's heart ached thinking about this child surviving, on her own for almost 2 weeks. "That must have been really scary," he said gently. She nodded, and this time Tom could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "You've been very brave," he told her. "But you don't have to be alone anymore. I want to help you, but I need to understand. What happened? Is there any adult who takes care of you? Someone who might be looking for you?" The girl's tears began to fall silently. She shook her head and pointed toward a small cemetery that was visible through the trees behind the house. Tom understood. Someone important to her was buried in that cemetery. Someone who used to take care of her. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "That must hurt very much." The girl nodded and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Over the next few days, Tom established a routine. He would arrive every morning around 9 o'clock, bringing fresh food and materials to work on the house. The girl, who he had started calling Rabbit in his mind because she never let go of that stuffed animal, would help him in small ways. She was incredibly smart, Tom realized. When he explained how to measure boards or why certain screws worked better than others, she absorbed every word. She had an intuitive understanding of how things fit together, and her help actually made his work go faster. On the 4th day, Tom made a discovery that changed everything. While cleaning out a bedroom closet, he found a cardboard box full of papers and photographs. With the girl's permission, she nodded when he asked if he could look through them. Tom began to piece together her story. The papers belonged to someone named Ruth Johnson, who had been the girl's grandmother. There were school records showing that the girl's name was Lily and that she had been an excellent student until about 9 months ago, when she'd stopped attending school entirely. There were medical records too, and letters from social workers. Tom learned that Lily's parents had died in a car accident when she was very young, and that Ruth had been her legal guardian. The papers painted a picture of an older woman who had tried her best to care for a traumatized child, but who had struggled with her own health problems. The most heartbreaking discovery was Ruth's handwritten journal. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago, and it showed how worried Ruth had been about what would happen to Lily if something happened to her. She had written, "Lily hasn't spoken since the accident. Doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with her voice, but the trauma runs too deep. I'm getting sicker, and I don't know who will understand her the way I do." When Tom showed Lily the journal, she broke down completely. She cried for what seemed like hours, all the grief and fear and loneliness pouring out of her. Tom sat beside her and let her cry, occasionally offering her tissues or a glass of water. "Ruth loved you very much," he said when her sobs finally quieted. "She was worried about you because she cared about you, just like I'm worried about you now." Lily looked up at him with red, puffy eyes. "I know you can't talk," Tom continued, "and I know that's because something really terrible happened to you. But I want you to know that you're safe now. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you." That afternoon, Tom made some phone calls. He spoke to Ruth's doctor, who confirmed that she had died of heart failure 3 weeks earlier. He talked to the school district, who said they had tried to do a welfare check when Lily stopped attending, but had been told by Ruth that they were homeschooling now. Somehow, in the confusion after Ruth's death, Lily had slipped through the cracks. The house had gone into foreclosure proceedings, but no one had thought to check if anyone was still living there. A 12-year-old girl had become invisible to the system that was supposed to protect her. Tom spent that night researching his options. He could call Child Protective Services, but that would mean Lily would be placed in foster care with strangers. He could try to become her legal guardian himself, but that would involve lawyers and social workers and a long, complicated process. Or he could do what felt right in his heart, take care of her himself, quietly and carefully, while he figured out the best long-term solution. The next morning, Tom brought something new to the house, a portable radio. As they worked together on replacing some rotten floorboards, he tuned it to a classical music station. Lily's eyes lit up at the sound of a piano concerto, and she worked with more energy than Tom had ever seen from her. "You like music?" he observed. Lily nodded enthusiastically and pointed to an old piano in the corner of the living room. Tom hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now he looked closer. Despite the house's overall condition, the piano was well maintained and dust-free. There were sheet music books stacked neatly on the bench. "Do you play?" Tom asked. Lily walked over to the piano and sat on the bench. Her fingers found the keys like they belonged there, and she began to play. The melody that filled the old house was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. It was the first time Tom had heard Lily express herself, and it was more eloquent than any words could have been. When she finished playing, Lily looked at Tom with tears in her eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, like she had finally been able to say something she'd been holding inside for a very long time. Tom walked over and sat beside her on the piano bench. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," he said honestly. "Will you teach me to play?" Lily smiled. It was the first real, full smile Tom had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. She nodded and placed his fingers on the keys, showing him how to play a simple melody. They spent the rest of that day making music together. Lily played complicated pieces while Tom struggled with basic scales, but they both laughed when he hit the wrong notes. For the first time since Tom had met her, Lily seemed like what she was, a normal 12-year-old girl who happened to have been through something terrible. That evening, as Tom was getting ready to leave, Lily did something that surprised him. She walked to the kitchen table and picked up a pencil and paper. In her careful handwriting, she wrote, "Will you come back tomorrow?" Tom knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Lily," he said, "I will come back every day for as long as you need me to. That's a promise." Lily wrote something else and handed him the paper. "Thank you for not giving up on me." As Tom drove home that night, he realized that his $1 house had given him something worth far more than the money he'd paid for it. It had given him a purpose, and maybe, if he was very lucky, it had given him a family. The next morning, Tom woke up with a new plan. It was time to start thinking about the future, not just fixing up the house, but making it a real home for both of them. 3 weeks had passed since Tom first found Lily in the old house. What had started as a simple home renovation project had become the most important work of his life. Every morning, he would drive to Elm Creek Road with fresh supplies, groceries, and a growing sense of purpose. The house was slowly transforming. Tom had fixed the roof, replaced the broken windows, and installed a new water heater. But more importantly, Lily was transforming too. She had gained weight, her clothes were clean, and the constant fear in her eyes had softened into something that looked almost like happiness. They had developed their own language of nods and gestures, written notes, and piano melodies. Lily would help Tom with his work, handing him tools and holding boards in place. In return, Tom had been teaching her basic carpentry skills. She was a natural, with steady hands and an eye for detail that impressed him every day. But Tom knew that written notes and helpful gestures couldn't replace spoken words forever. At some point, if Lily was going to have a normal life, she would need to find her voice again. He just didn't know how to help her do that. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday morning in October. Tom had arrived at the house to find that a strong wind the night before had knocked down a large tree branch. It was blocking the front door, and Tom couldn't get inside to check on Lily. "Lily!" he called out, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. "Are you okay in there?" He could hear movement inside the house but couldn't see anything through the windows. The fallen branch was too heavy for him to move by himself, and he didn't have his truck positioned where he could use it to pull the branch away. Tom walked around the house, looking for another way in. The back door was locked from the inside, and all the windows were too high for him to reach. He was starting to panic, imagining Lily trapped inside with no way out, when he heard a sound that stopped him cold. Tapping. Someone was tapping on the glass from inside. Tom ran back to the kitchen window and saw Lily's face pressed against the glass. She was pointing toward the side of the house and mouthing words he couldn't understand. "I can't hear you through the glass," Tom called out. "Can you open the window?" Lily shook her head and pointed more frantically toward the side yard. Tom followed her gestures and found what she was trying to show him. An old cellar door that led to the basement. It was partially hidden by weeds, but it wasn't blocked by the fallen tree. The cellar door was heavy and creaky, but it opened. Tom climbed down into the dark basement and found the stairs that led up into the house. When he emerged into the kitchen, Lily was waiting for him, her face pale with worry. "Are you hurt?" Tom asked immediately, looking her over for any signs of injury. Lily shook her head and pointed toward the front of the house. She led Tom to the living room where he could see the full extent of the problem. The fallen branch hadn't just blocked the door. It had also cracked one of the newly installed windows and knocked over a bookshelf. "This is bad," Tom muttered, surveying the damage. "I'm going to need help moving that branch. I'll have to call someone with a chainsaw, and that's going to cost money I don't really have right now." As Tom stood there calculating costs and making plans, he didn't notice that Lily had disappeared. When he turned around to ask her opinion about something, she was gone. "Lily?" he called out. "Where did you go?" He heard sounds coming from the basement and found Lily rummaging through a collection of old tools that had been left behind by previous owners. She emerged holding a rusty handsaw that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Lily carried the saw upstairs and held it out to Tom with a questioning look. Tom examined the old tool. The blade was dull and rusty, but the handle seemed solid. "You think we can cut through that branch with this old thing?" he asked. Lily nodded confidently and mimed the motion of sawing wood. "It's worth a try," Tom said. "But it's going to take forever, and my arms are going to be really tired." Lily held up her hand in a wait gesture and disappeared again. This time she came back with an old set of work gloves that were too big for her hands, but which she put on anyway. Tom understood. "You want to help saw the branch?" Lily nodded and flexed her arms to show him how strong she was. Despite everything, Tom had to smile. This 12-year-old girl had more determination than most adults he knew. They worked together for the next hour, taking turns with the old saw. The blade was dull and the work was slow, but gradually they began to cut through the thick branch. Tom was amazed by Lily's persistence. Even when her small arms grew tired, she refused to give up. "You're incredibly strong," Tom told her during one of their breaks. "Not just physically, but inside too, do you know that?" Lily looked up at him with sweat beading on her forehead and gave him a small smile. They were about halfway through the branch when disaster struck. Tom was taking his turn with the saw when the blade hit a knot in the wood and twisted sharply. The old handle, weakened by years of neglect, snapped completely in half. Tom stared at the broken tool in disbelief. "Well, that's just perfect," he said, more to himself than to Lily. "Now what are we going to do?" He sat down heavily on the front steps, frustrated and defeated. They had worked so hard, and now they were back where they started. The branch was still blocking the door. They had no tools to cut it, and Tom couldn't afford to hire someone to help them. That's when he felt a small hand on his shoulder. Tom looked up to see Lily standing beside him, her face full of concern. She was still wearing those oversized work gloves, and there was sawdust in her hair. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Tom saw something in Lily's eyes that he hadn't seen before, determination mixed with something else. Trust, maybe, or love. "I don't know what we're going to do, kiddo," Tom said quietly. "I'm all out of ideas." Lily took off her gloves and sat down beside him on the steps. She picked up the broken saw handle and examined it thoughtfully. Then she looked at Tom with an expression that seemed to say, "Don't give up yet." She stood up and walked over to the fallen branch. Tom watched as she studied the cut they had already made, running her fingers along the groove in the wood. Then she did something that surprised him. Lily began to push against the branch with all her strength. Her face turned red with effort, and Tom could see the muscles in her thin arms straining, but the branch was far too heavy for someone her size to move. "Lily, stop," Tom said, standing up. "You're going to hurt yourself." But Lily didn't stop. She kept pushing, and suddenly Tom realized what she was trying to show him. The cut they had made had weakened the branch significantly. If they both pushed together in just the right spot, they might be able to break it the rest of the way through. Tom positioned himself next to Lily, and together they pushed against the branch with everything they had. At first, nothing happened. Then Tom heard a small cracking sound. "It's working," he said. "Keep pushing." They pushed harder, both of them straining with the effort. Tom heard more cracking sounds, and the branch began to move slightly. "Come on," Tom grunted. "Just a little more." Lily let out a small grunt of effort, and Tom felt the branch give way suddenly. But as it broke, the heavy end swung down faster than either of them expected, heading straight for Lily. Without thinking, Tom threw himself forward and shoved Lily out of the way. She stumbled and fell safely to the side, but Tom wasn't quick enough to get himself clear. The branch caught him across the shoulder and knocked him to the ground. Pain shot through Tom's arm and back. He lay still for a moment, trying to figure out if anything was broken. His shoulder felt like it was on fire, but he could move his fingers, which he thought was probably a good sign. "I'm okay," he said, as much to reassure himself as Lily. "Just got clipped a little bit, nothing serious." But when Tom tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred, and he had to put his head back down on the ground. That's when he heard it. A sound he had been waiting to hear for weeks. "Tom!" The voice was small and scared, but it was definitely a voice. Tom's eyes snapped open, and through his blurry vision, he saw Lily kneeling beside him, her hands hovering over his injured shoulder. "Tom," she said again, louder this time. "Are you hurt? Can you hear me?" For a moment, Tom forgot all about the pain in his shoulder. After weeks of silence, after all those written notes and gestures and careful nods, Lily was speaking. Her voice was rusty from disuse, but it was clear and real and absolutely beautiful. "I can hear you," Tom said softly. "You're talking." Tears began to stream down Lily's face. "I was so scared," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "When that branch was falling toward me, and then when it hit you, I thought I was going to lose you too." Tom struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. Hey, he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere. I promised you that, remember?" Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. "I remember. But when I saw you get hurt trying to protect me, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I had to make sure you were okay." "I am okay," Tom assured her. "My shoulder hurts, but I'll be fine. The important thing is that you found your voice again." Lily looked down at her hands. "I've wanted to talk to you for weeks," she said quietly. "There were so many things I wanted to say, but every time I tried, I would remember the accident, and the words would just disappear." 6 months after Tom first heard Lily's voice, their lives had changed in ways neither of them could have imagined. The old house on Elm Creek Road was no longer a crumbling shack. It had become a real home, filled with laughter, music, and the warm smell of Lily's homemade bread. Tom's shoulder had healed completely, though he still had a small scar where the tree branch had hit him. Lily joked that it was his hero mark, and Tom had to admit he was proud of it. It reminded him of the moment when everything changed, when Lily found her courage and her voice. The legal process had been complicated, but not impossible. Tom had hired a family lawyer with the money he'd started earning from his new carpentry business, a business that had grown rapidly once word spread about his careful, honest work. The lawyer had helped him navigate the system, and after months of paperwork, interviews, and home visits, Tom had been approved as Lily's official guardian. The social workers had been impressed by what they found. Lily was healthy, happy, and thriving. She had gained 20 pounds, her hair was shiny and well cut, and she spoke confidently about her future plans. The house was safe, clean, and clearly filled with love. But the most impressive thing was Lily's academic progress. Once, Her voice returned. It became clear just how intelligent she really was. Tom had enrolled her in online classes to catch up on the schooling she had missed, and within weeks, her teachers were recommending that she skip ahead a grade. Lily was particularly gifted in mathematics and science, but she excelled in every subject she touched. "I want to be an architect," she told Tom one evening as they worked together on building a new bookshelf for her growing collection. "I want to design houses that make people feel safe and happy." Tom smiled as he watched her measure a board with perfect precision. "I think you'd be amazing at that," he said. "You already know more about construction than most adults." It was true. Over the months they had spent renovating the house together, Lily had become Tom's most skilled assistant. She could read blueprints, use power tools safely, and had an intuitive understanding of how structures worked. More than that, she had creative ideas that often made Tom's projects better and more beautiful. The house itself had become something special. What had started as a necessary renovation had turned into a labor of love. Tom and Lily had worked together to create not just a livable space, but a home that reflected both of their personalities. The living room centered around the old piano, which Tom had paid to have professionally tuned and restored. Lily played every day, sometimes classical, pieces she remembered from her lessons with Ruth and sometimes songs she composed herself. Tom had learned to play simple melodies, and their evening duets had become one of their favorite traditions. The kitchen was bright and cheerful, with new appliances and a large window that looked out over the garden Lily had planted. She had discovered a love of growing things, and their yard now bloomed with vegetables, herbs, and flowers that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. Tom had built Lily a workshop of her own in the converted basement, where she could work on her own woodworking projects. Her latest creation was a beautiful jewelry box with secret compartments, which she planned to give to Mrs. Patterson next door as a thank you gift for all her help during the transition. Mrs. Patterson had become like a grandmother to Lily. The elderly woman had been suspicious at first when Tom explained the situation, but Lily's sweet nature and obvious happiness had quickly won her over. Now, Mrs. Patterson came for dinner every Sunday, and she and Lily had started a tradition of baking cookies together every Wednesday afternoon. The most important change, though, was in Lily herself. The frightened, silent child Tom had found in the corner of that bedroom had blossomed into a confident, talkative 12-year-old with strong opinions about everything from the best way to organize a toolbox to her theories about space travel. She still had nightmares sometimes, and there were days when the sadness of losing her parents and Ruth would wash over her like a wave. But Tom had learned how to help her through those difficult moments. Sometimes they would talk about her feelings. Sometimes they would work on a project together, and sometimes they would just sit quietly while Lily played piano until the sadness passed. "The thing I love most about living here," Lily told Tom, one evening as they sat on their newly rebuilt front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, "is that I get to choose what happens next. For so long, everything was just happening to me. Bad things, sad things, scary things. But now I get to make decisions and plans and dreams." Tom nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "What's your biggest dream?" he asked. Lily was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I want to design and build houses for kids who don't have families," she said finally. "Not just regular houses, but special ones. Houses that feel safe and warm and full of love, even before the families move in. I want to create homes that heal people, the way this house healed us." Tom felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even at 12 years old, Lily was already thinking about how to help other people who were facing the same challenges she had overcome. "That's the most beautiful dream I've ever heard," he said honestly. "And I know you'll make it happen." "Will you help me?" Lily asked. "When I'm older and ready to start my company, will you be my partner?" Tom laughed, picturing a future where he and a grown-up Lily worked together to build homes for children in need. "I would be honored to be your partner," he said. "But I think by then, you'll be so much better at this stuff than me that you'll probably be teaching me." "Maybe," Lily said with a grin. "But you'll always be the one who taught me that broken things can be fixed, and that every problem has a solution if you're patient enough to find it." As autumn turned to winter, their first winter together as a real family, Tom reflected on how much his life had changed since that day he bid $1 on a foreclosed property. He had bought the house hoping to solve his financial problems, but instead he had found something far more valuable. He had found purpose. He had found love. He had found a daughter who challenged him to be better and braver than he had ever thought possible. The carpentry business was doing well, and Tom had started getting contracts to renovate other foreclosed properties around the county. He and Lily worked on the projects together when she wasn't busy with her studies, and they had developed a reputation for bringing new life to forgotten places. But their favorite project was still their own home. They were constantly finding new ways to improve it, new rooms to add, new systems to upgrade. Tom had taught Lily that a home was never really finished. It was a living thing that grew and changed along with the people who lived in it. On Christmas morning, Tom gave Lily a present that made her cry happy tears, a professional drafting table and a complete set of architect's tools. "For your future office," he said, "so you can start designing those healing houses." Lily's present to Tom was a hand-carved, wooden sign that read, "Johnson Miller Family Workshop," combining Ruth's last name with Tom's to create their own family identity. "Johnson Miller?" Tom asked, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Ruth will always be part of our family," Lily explained. "She brought us together in a way. If she hadn't taken care of me, if she hadn't loved me enough to worry about my future, I never would have been in that house for you to find." Tom hung the sign proudly outside their workshop, and every time he saw it, he was reminded of the chain of love and loss and hope that had brought them together. As spring arrived, and Lily's 13th birthday approached, Tom realized that their story was still being written. The girl who had been silent was now the most articulate person he knew. The man who had been drifting without direction had found his calling as a father and mentor. "You know what's funny?" Lily said one evening as they worked together to build a treehouse in the old oak behind their house. "What's that?" Tom asked, steadying a board while she hammered in a nail. "I used to think that losing my voice was the worst thing that ever happened to me," she said. "But if I hadn't lost it, I might not have been so scared and alone. And if I hadn't been scared and alone, I might not have been hiding in that house. And if I hadn't been hiding in that house, you might not have found me." Tom paused in his work to look at her. "Are you saying you're glad it happened?" Lily considered the question carefully. "I'm not glad my parents died," she said. "And I'm not glad Ruth got sick. Those things were terrible, and I still miss them every day. But I am glad that all the sad things that happened led me to you. I'm glad that your sad things led you to me too." Tom nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. His job loss, his financial struggles, his desperate bid on a $1 house. All of it had been difficult and scary at the time. But it had also been the path that led him to Lily. "Sometimes," Tom said, "the best things in life come disguised as problems. Or as opportunities," Lily added with a smile. "You took a chance on a broken-down house, and it gave you a family. I took a chance on trusting you, and it gave me my voice back." As they worked together in the golden afternoon light, Tom knew that Lily,